I'm delighted to do that. I'm Gary Salver, co-chair of the English Festival Committee, and it's wonderful to have Sally with us at this 43rd English Festival. I've thought of myself as a writer since I was in second grade, writes Sally Pla. Her teacher, Mrs. McDonald, encouraged her, as did another teacher at the school, Mr. Simpson. Great teachers are like superheroes, she writes, and we agree with that. As to what it takes to be a writer, Sally Pla says, you do not need anything except your heart, your brain, and a way to communicate that works with you. Of course, we know Sally Pla through that wonderful book about birds and families and journeys called The Someday Birds, a work that has won multiple awards and which the ALA book list calls a delight from beginning to end. And we thought it was a delight too. That's why we were so happy to put it on the reading list you students have been reading. A note before Sally begins, and Jeff has already mentioned that, we hope to have time for questions at the end. While she's speaking, feel free to send questions through the chat function, and my colleague Stacy Graver will review them and ask as many as possible in our remaining time. Sally Pla, welcome to the 2021 YSU English Festival. We look forward to your visit with us.
Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and I'm so excited to be with you guys today. I just realized today is World Book Day. Friday, April 23rd is World Book Day. I guess that's no coincidence to you guys. Maybe that's why you're doing it now, but I thought that was kind of exciting news and kind of cool. And I guess this is the third day of your festival, your amazing festival. So I don't know if you guys are like festivaled out or anything a little bit, or if you're like all ready for the weekend or all excited about all of the different ideas and all of the different books that you have read and talked about. I'm just amazed at the wonderful books that were on your list this year. I was taking a look on the website. You guys have read some really incredible books. There's historical fiction, there's inspirational stories about people that have done incredible things. There's been informative books that have taught you stuff. I mean, just in general, some really incredible stories. I guess I'm coming to talk to you today. And I have a little slideshow. I'm going to see if I can share screen and start with my slideshow in a second. But I'm, the Someday Birds and the books that I'm writing and have written, I'm really interested in the now, in contemporary fiction, in how we feel now, and just that the whole, and it's that feeling of like slipping inside the skin of another person and seeing what it feels like to be that other human, what that experience feels like. Is really amazing to me and immediate, and that's something I'm really interested in. But yeah, so I thought I would riff off of that a little bit, and I'm going to see if I can share screen here, if that's okay, and see if I can launch my little PowerPoint. I hope I'm doing this right. Is this working for you guys? Do you see my screen?
Y'all.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about where do stories come from in contemporary fiction? And where do my stories come from? The stories that come in your brain, the stories that you tell yourself. I read something really kind of cool the other day. I was reading this book of essays by Zadie Smith, and she said this thing that is like stuck in my brain. She said that when English departments should be renamed controlling experience departments, because that's what we do when we tell stories. We try to control our experience of the world. We retell our stories in the way we wanted them to happen. Have you guys ever done that yourselves with events in your life? Like you went to a party, or you went to you had an exchange with somebody at a soccer match, or I don't know, whatever it is, and you didn't like how it worked. And so you went home and you revised it in your brain, and you thought, oh, here's me saying this thing, or what if I had worn this and I had, moved this way, or said this to the person, or how would that have changed? And we control our experience when we retell stories about the events of our lives, kind of. And so Zadie Smith, who's an amazing author I love, she's thought that that's what fiction does, that it controls, it's our way of controlling our life experience. I kind of disagree with that, actually, because for me, it's like, I want to try to share my experience with you guys. I want to share what's going on inside my heart and my brain, and what that feels like, and ask my readers the question, or hopefully reach out to you and think, is this how it feels like for you too, to be a human being? Is this what it feels like for you too? And it's that sharing that matters to me so much. So anyway, I'm just exploring that a little bit. The very, very first book I wrote was a picture book. It was called Benji, the Bad Day and Me. It wasn't the first one published, but it was the first thing I ever wrote when I first started thinking that I could tell stories and try to share these thoughts and ideas. And where it sort of came from is a bunch of different places, kind of like a soup of experience in your life that all comes together. It's like the soup with all these ingredients, and they stick in your head and they float around in there. And then suddenly one day you realize what the theme is of the story that you're trying to tell, that you want to get across. And for Benji, the ingredients in my soup were these two guys. Those are my sons, Andrew and Nate. They're really close in age. One is autistic and one isn't. And we spent a lot of time when they were growing up, going to therapists and occupational and physical therapists, and sitting in waiting rooms and such. And they're really, really close, the two brothers. So the experience of raising them, I actually have three boys, but their older brother was a little bit too older for that experience. All right, now here's another photo. This is me and my brother, Todd, when we were growing up. I grew up in Connecticut, and I was a really shy kid that had a lot of trouble and struggles in school with speaking, and I had a lot of sensory issues. Things were just a little overwhelming in the world. I loved animals. I love my dog. I still love dogs, and I love animals so much and really relate to them. At this point, nobody knew because I grew up a long, long time ago in like the dark ages, but I was an autistic kid. I just never got a diagnosis until I was an adult. So that's a lot of what was going on with me, and a lot of why I was really similar to my son without even realizing it, which is kind of weird. Anyhow, here are more ingredients to the soup that led to the picture book, Benji, the Bad Day and Me. I was kind of upset because a lot of people were saying things like autistic kids don't have empathy, or if you're autistic, you don't have feelings for other people. You don't understand normal human beings because you're autistic. And that is so wrong. It's like almost the opposite. If you are, you have more empathy. You just have so many feelings that it's overwhelming at times to get them down or to express them properly in a way that other people can appreciate. So I wanted to counteract that false notion in my picture book. Some other things are just crummy days when you're having a really bad day, what that feels like. Therapy ladies, when you go to therapy and they're always like so super happy, and you know, it's kind of funny a little bit. Karate lessons, wanting to take karate, having to sit in a waiting room while your brother gets to do all the fun stuff with the sensory gym and, you know, all this kind of fun stuff. Berry smoothies, blanket burritos, love. That all kind of swished around and made that picture book. Here's another book, Stanley Will Probably Be Fine, that I wrote. I came after the Someday Birds. Some of the ingredients that went into that book was the city of San Diego, where I live, and the fact that, you know, Comic-Con happens here every year, every July. San Diego Comic-Con is this huge comics festival. Some of you guys for sure must know about it. It's just massive, and people dress up for it, and it's just this, the whole city kind of goes gonzo. It's this big nuts celebration of pop culture and comics and all that kind of stuff. And it's really fun. So my sons and I, they really wanted to go, but I was so scared. I just, again, being that little kid that was scared of, you know, too much sensory input, I just couldn't really deal with it. So I was scared to go to Comic-Con. And we had Marvel because we had watched all the Marvel movies in order, and we were really getting into comics, you know, and reading comics and stuff. And so that all kind of mushed together with me as a kid, thinking back to what it was like when I had first started middle school and I was so scared of everything. This is an illustration from inside the book, Stanley Will Probably Be Fine, where Stanley really wants to do this trivia quest to win tickets to go to Comic-Con, but he's just stuck. It's like, what if I get lost? What if I get mugged? What if I look dumb? What if I get hurt? You know, what if all these horrible things? What if I have to go to the bathroom? You know, it's like freaking out because it's going to be so stressful for him to go do this thing that he desperately wants to do. So that definitely added to it. So here's the soup. Here's the soup that ended up being this Stanley. Anxiety, sensory processing issues, starting middle school, losing your friends when you start middle school, hating safety drills, Principal Coffin, you know, this principal who's well-meaning but just is terrifying. A dog crate trick that my kids learned a very secret torture trick of how to lock each other in our dog crate and like stick it on the top of the stairs so that if you tried to exit the dog crate, you'd fall down the stairs. And I thought this was such a hideous brotherly trick that it became the opening scene of the book. Keeping chickens, which my neighbor does. Being plagued by coyotes, which we are. They come up the canyon all the time and it's worrisome. Coyotes started to symbolize for me worries. Overworked moms, brothers that are bullies that have issues, comics trivia, treasure hunts, San Diego, the creeping realization that your dog isn't very smart. All these things were kind of going around in my brain and they ended up becoming the story of Stanley Will Probably Be Fine. It's weird how it happens. It's almost like some kind of magic. It just takes all those ingredients and blends them together after a while and you realize what your story is. And sometimes you don't know that when you start writing at all. And here's the Someday Birds. There were a lot of ingredients in that one. As a first full-length novel I tried to write, I came to writing later in life. I had a career as a business journalist for a while. I did a lot of freelance work that way. Then I got involved in the school system, the public school system. I was a special education advocate. You know, I was on a school board for many years. You know, I taught writing at Penn State for a little while, actually, while I was still in school. I've done a bunch of different things, but I never gave myself permission to try to write a novel, a full novel, until the Someday Birds. And still all the ingredients started to finally coalesce for me together. Until I finally realized if I don't give myself permission to do this thing that I've always wanted to do, you know, when will I do it? Time was slipping by. So I decided to give myself permission to try. And I'm so happy I did because it was the most fulfilling thing. And it was written to be a heart gift for my sons really at first. It's just something fun. I was thinking about my autistic son and how much he loved birds. And how we had that in common because when I was a kid, I also just loved birds. I used to love to go out into the nature paths and trails. We had this amazing teacher at school who would come in. She was actually a mom. She wasn't a teacher. She would just come in once or twice a semester and she would take us all out on the trails and she would teach us the name of every berry and bush, and she would tell us all these stories and the names of all the different birds, and it was so cool to me. And also it got me out of the classroom, which I loved. So I just had so much fun, and it just opened my mind to nature and to birds and gave me a love of nature. So her name was Mrs. Shaw. And so there's a character in the book, The Someday Birds, that's named after her. So my son, loving birds and drawing all these amazing pictures of birds, he was obsessed with drawing birds for about a year. We have hundreds of pictures of birds that he drew out of Audubon's Birds of America, the book. We had that small baby elephant folio in our house, and he would turn the pages and draw all the pictures. So that was one of the ingredients in my soup. The other one was those crazy car trips that you take. Have you guys ever done this with your family? You have to take a car trip, a long car trip somewhere, and you're stuck in the back with your brothers and sisters, and it can get really annoying. we did some of those trips when our boys were little. And we had some interesting adventures, especially because they were a little bit hard on my son Nate and also on me, just all that change and, you know, being on the road. We saw some wonderful things. We visited almost every location that's in the Someday Birds as a family on that car trip, almost every one. And that prompted it too. But it was hard. Here's my boys and my husband and the dog. See, they're not too far off from this crazy movie still from the movie called Family Vacation or whatever it was called with Chevy Chase that came out a million years ago. But things were kind of a circus with us too. And it was a little hard, especially on my son Nate, who would only eat chicken nuggets. And the original title of the book was actually Chicken Nuggets Across America, because one of my sons, that's all we ate. That's, you know, we had to always stop somewhere where he could have chicken nuggets. It was really important for him to have that, you know, something the same that he could actually ingest and enjoy. So we did. And after like our second summer of traveling, my oldest son turned and said to his brother, you know what? We should write a travel journal and we could just call it Chicken Nuggets Across America, because we sampled them from like 17 different states now. And we thought that was pretty funny, but the idea stuck in my head. What if we did do that? What if there was a travel journal? And what would be the question that I, you know, what would it be? If I could give myself permission to write that book, what would it be about? What would I be trying to say?
Sally, if I could just jump in here, some of the schools are reporting your presentation is a little hard to see. Is it possible to put the PowerPoint into presentation mode so it takes up the full screen?
Sure, yeah, I can try to do that. Here we go. Sorry, you guys, I totally forgot. Is that better?
I hope that's better. They'll let us know if it isn't, so thank you.
Okay, sure. All right. Yeah, so the question that that came to me thinking if I wanted to try to write that book, if I did want to write Chicken Nuggets Across America and start to record that travel journal of thoughts and feelings of what we had gone through, and if that was my story, if that was what I wanted to write, it seemed to me that this was the question. When you're autistic, what does it take to help you feel more at ease in the world? You know, what is that journey going to feel like? So here are some other things that are the soup that went into the Someday Birds. How bird behavior is similar to human behavior. I started reading birds, all kinds of different bird books, and finding out more about interesting bird behaviors and thinking that maybe that was the key, you know, and maybe there should be a character that honored my old teacher, Mrs. Shaw. Maybe I could make him a mysterious bird guru that lived out in the marsh somewhere that Charlie would become fascinated with. Having a squabbly family of kids that, you know, fight in the back seat of the car and don't always get along and have their own issues. But the power of love in that family. And Mrs. Shaw, I just mentioned her. Also war, you know, just why? Why do we, a lot of the Someday Birds has to do with war. It's just something that continually plagues me and has all my life, the injustice and the horror of it. And why do we have it? Why does it even exist? Why are human beings the way human beings are? Why are we aggressive? Why do we fight each other? Why does that even happen on the most basic fundamental level inside our characters and our natures? Why is that there? I have a hard time understanding that. Also, a lady I met once at a cocktail party is in this book because she turned out to be the sort of the prototype for Ludmila. I only met her for a few minutes, but she was talking about growing up as a child in Bosnia and coming over after the war there and how everyone had completely forgotten about that war. And I started looking into it and researching that war and realizing, yeah, in the middle of Europe, there was this terrible, terrible war in the 1990s. And everyone sort of seems to have completely forgotten it even happened. Why does that happen? I live in San Diego, as I mentioned before, and there are many military families that live here. And so their experience of the world is something that interested me a lot and that I wanted to write into the book. Also, I did some research on, there was a a scientist, a man named Stuart Brand, who's really interested in unextincting animals, seriously, like Jurassic Park level stuff. It's fascinating and wild, but it made me start thinking, what if a bird was unextincted? Some scientists are working on this issue right now. And for various reasons, for scientific reasons too, because they think it might help the balance of nature, or would it actually hurt the balance of nature? It's a bit controversial, but anyhow, it fascinated me. When I grew up, I lived by the Audubon Society, by those trails, and they were a lifesaver for me as a kid that often got overwhelmed by other people's demands and just school, you know, everything was really hard for me. And I would go out on the trails and it would be peaceful, and I would climb a tree, and it saved me. Fear, anxiety, you know, those are big things. Autism, of course, because that's part of my life experience. Chicken nuggets, which we mentioned, taking long car trips, road trips, having a really gruff grandma, which I did. She helped raise us, and she was very much like the grandma in the book. So those are all things that led into the soup that became the Someday Birds. Here's a quote from Gordon Lesh, who is a famous editor and author too. He said, "Wear your heart on the page and people will read to find how you solved being alive." I love that because I feel like that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show my heart and share it so that you guys, so that reader, you guys or anyone reading can understand what that is. And maybe we can connect that way. Maybe we can connect. Maybe you feel the same way we do. And I'm not sure if anybody actually solves being alive, but we're all trying. We're all trying. And I thought this was a wonderful quote as well. How the writing process is an interplay between the ideas you begin with. You have this idea in your head at the very beginning about the kind of story you're going to write. It's that soup, you know, all those different ingredients that I've been talking about. But the story that comes out at the end is always a little different. It's always different from what you think you're going to start out with. And that's okay. That's cool, actually. That's part of the magic of it. But it's really an interesting thing. And I think maybe this is the most important thing of all. Linda Barry is this wonderful artist, and she has these incredible books that help your creativity. If you're ever interested in them, look her up. She's got one called Syllabus, and it's all kinds of, it's like a composition notebook with all kinds of cool stuff inside, prompts to help you think about your art, you know, to help you to do some art and doodle and have fun with art, and also, you know, think of the stories that you have to tell. And she said once, it's the artist's job to bring 50% to the work of art, and the audience supplies the other 50%. And I think that's true with books as well. Here's this story in front of you. Here's this book in front of you. But what really matters is what you take away from it. What has it added to your life or to how you view the world? Were you able to slip inside the skin of that character? Were you able to feel that? Did you make that connection? Not every book will do it for you. Everybody's different about what books are meaningful for them. But what you bring to it is so important as a reader, and hopefully it enriches your life. So that's pretty much it. That was my little slideshow. Yeah, you know, I hope that there's some ideas in there or some thoughts that are interesting to you. And that's pretty much it. You know, the reason for my books and the ones that I'm working on now as well is just to share that thought of, is this what it feels like to be a human being for you guys too? Here's what it feels like for me. Here are some thoughts. Hopefully, you know, do we have some in common? What do you think? And that's about it. So, yeah, I left plenty of room for questions because that's the funnest part for, you know, for you, I think, with you guys to. So I'm totally open for, ask me anything at all.
All right, I've snapped pictures from the beginning of all of the questions, so we're going to do as many as possible from your adoring public. What advice do you have for somebody trying to write their own book?
I would say, just go for it. Don't expect it to be perfect. You're going to write your story, and that's a tremendous and wonderful thing to do. The most important thing is to have fun with it and just write it out. Don't expect it to be the perfect thing. You're going to get basically a first draft. Any writer will tell you this. It's never going to be perfect the first go round. You're going to find all kinds of different things that you're like want to interject and change and everything. Forget about it. Just keep going until you finish. You finish that draft of your story. No matter how faulty or flawed it looks like to you, it's a crummy first draft. That's good. It's supposed to be crummy. It's just you getting out the bare bones of the story first. And then let it sit like a loaf of bread that has to rise. Let it sit for a little while and then don't look at it. And then come back to it. Come back to it, after it's just been, you've forgotten a little bit about what it's like. Give it a few weeks or something or however long. Then come back to it and reread it and then think, does this capture what I've been meaning to say? How can I change it? How can I improve it? And I guarantee you, your brain is going to explode with ideas at that point. And it's going to be really exciting because then you're going to see the real shape and structure of what it is that the story you want to tell. So, and embrace that revision process, because that's where a story really becomes a story.
Excellent. Now, I have two questions that have a relationship to each other. Who or what inspired you to become a writer, and do you ever have trouble with inspiration for writing your books?
Oh my God, yes, I have so much trouble. Sometimes it doesn't always come easily. I think so many, and I've spoken with so many other authors that have said this too. Some stories just come to you and other stories you will struggle and struggle and struggle, and they just don't seem to want to come on the page for some reason. Usually there's something missing with the main character when that's the point, with that motivation of the character. And then you just have to put them aside. I've put aside as many manuscripts as I've finished. So yeah, that just happens. And you just have to deal with it. I think there was the first part of that question that I forgot to answer.
It was what inspired you to become a writer, and also, do you ever have challenges with inspiration?
Yeah, see, I jumped right to the challenges. In terms of inspiration, I've just wanted to write, or felt like that was my way of helping make sense of the world for as long as I've been alive. It really feels like writing has really helped me. When I was a kid, I had auditory processing issues. So when I was a kid, it was like the whole world was on a 3-second time delay. Teachers would say stuff and it would just take me like 3 extra seconds to understand, for my brain to like process what the instruction was. But those 3 seconds of that time delay was just long enough to frustrate my ability to communicate with other people, to understand and to respond in conversations with other kids. So that was a little tough. But when I wrote, if I could write things down, I could take all the time in the world. I could go back and revise it. I could get things on a page to say exactly what I meant. And that was harder for me to do speaking. So I guess from a young age, it's always been my saving thing to be able to write.
Thank you. How does it feel to have your name on the front cover of a book?
Oh, it was so exciting. It was so exciting to see that first book and to get it in the mail. They send you a box, a big cardboard box from the publisher, from HarperCollins, when your book is first going to come out. And then you open this big cardboard box and it's filled with your book and it's a real thing and it has a real cover. Here's a copy of it. It was so exciting, unbelievably, because you just never expect it to happen. So yeah, it was super, super cool.
Excellent. How did you pick the birds that you selected for the book?
Oh, that's such a great question. It was definitely a winnowing process. I thought about geography, about the time of year that they'd be traveling, about what birds they might be likely to see in order to choose some of the list. And then I really did want to throw some mysterious, really weird, wacky choices on there that you wouldn't expect to find on a cross-country trip across America, and just see how would they end up finding those, and just let it unroll the way it did.
Thank you. Why did you make Ludmila the one to really understand Charlie?
Because Ludmila's been through her own struggles as well. You know, her character is just sort of developed as the book developed too. You know, you think about when you writing in your main character, when you think about the other characters around that character as a writer, you want to shape those other characters to act on your main character in different ways, in important ways, and to pull at them and challenge them in different ways. And so Ludmila, I didn't think she was very important at first. She was just going to be some like comic relief babysitter, you know. I wasn't really thinking about her. But boy, did she get to be a really important character in the story. And I think it's because Charlie needed her to be that. He needed her, and so she came to life that way.
Thank you. How do you come up with your characters? How do you develop characters?
Well, I think that goes back to what we were just talking about, what I was just talking about. It starts with that main character. And I think your plot, your story, everything starts with your main character and what that main character wants and needs. So that's in your head as a writer, and I was thinking, what does Charlie want and need? Charlie wants and needs to learn how to be more at ease in the world. He needs to learn how to be more resilient and feel more successful in himself. How is he going to get there? Okay, so we're going to need other characters that are going to help him, challenge him that way. Sometimes I even draw diagrams about, like, I can show you maybe quickly. I'll draw a diagram to show how the main character is in the middle, and then with all the side characters, I make them pull the main character in different directions. Like, see, if the C is Charlie there, if Ludmila is pulling him by giving him good advice and wisdom and helping him learn more about the world, who's going to foil that? What kind of character is going to pull on him in the opposite direction and confuse him a little maybe? Maybe that's Grandma, you know? Maybe she means well, but she's like the opposite of Ludmila in that she's a bad guide. She's not helping him too much right now. She doesn't understand him, you know? Or if he has little brothers that are being kind of a pain in the neck, you know, and then maybe this is Davis over here that's challenging him as a sibling in a different way. It can't be the same way. You know, all the characters have to add something different to that main character's experience of the world. So there's a little strategy there in coming up with all the other characters in the story.
That graphic organizer is terrific to give everyone a cue as to how to develop character. Related to that, another student wants to know, how do I start writing my own book?
There's no right way to start except what's in your heart that you want to tell. Sometimes what I do is, as the story's building in my brain, I don't actually start with the first sentence and sit down and say, chapter 1, it was a dark and stormy night. You know, it doesn't like come that way really. But what you can do is you can start with like a notebook or something, or a little meta journal where you start jotting your ideas. They can be anything. I have like a journal here. It's just like a cheapo journal. And then I write like all kinds of nonsense. I draw pictures. Oh, this one was actually Charlie. This was Charlie. I drew him. That was one of the first things I did. I was like, okay, this is Charlie. Who the heck is this kid, and what's his deal, and what is he like? You know, and I just started doodling around and goofing around and writing my notes and exploring it. And what if, you know, asking a lot of what if questions. What if they took a cross-country trip? What if, you know, Grandma went with Dad and they were left by themselves? Or, you know, what if, just whatever what if you want, you know? A million of them, all kinds of different ones. Just keep brainstorming all those ideas. And pretty soon something's going to take shape that you're going to want to try for a story.
Thank you. And the illustrated journal, such a treat to see. It's beautiful.
It's so fun. And that's Linda Berry too. You know, she inspired me by reading her books, that you can just, you don't have to be a professional artist in order to just doodle in a book. And also you're not ruining the book by making bad doodles in it. Sometimes we get like these fancy journals and we think, oh, the journal is too good. I can't write anything bad in it. So now I'm scared to write anything at all in it. You know, it's so silly. We like trick ourselves that way. So there's even like a trick that you can do if you're scared to doodle or you're scared to do something. Take your nice journal and make a big X like right through the page. So now the page is ruined already. It's pre-ruined for you. And now you can go and like write and doodle and do whatever you want on it and you don't have to worry.
Awesome. Another student writes, do you ever second guess yourself? Do you have fears? Like, do you wonder if your readers will like your book?
Oh my God, do I have fears? So many fears. It's all about fears. All of my books are all about fears. I am like the most anxious-ridden, nervous person you have ever met. In fact, I was laughing with my son on the phone last night because I was so afraid of doing this because I'm afraid of everything. So like, tomorrow I've got to talk and I'm not sure it's going to be good and I'm going to be bad. And my son is like, yeah, Mom, that's great. You're giving a talk about anxiety and you're like so ridden with anxiety that you can't talk about anxiety. So yeah, it's pretty funny. I'm just, yeah, fear is fear, the fear monster. Slaying the fear monster is the theme of everything. Every book I ever write, you're going to see that in there somewhere. It's just, yeah. But something interesting. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, you know, I think part of that too, though, is like, do you guys remember the scene where Charlie was going down the big slide, the water slide? And he said, like, the scariest part wasn't actually going down the slide and getting hurt, like, you know, a bad thing. The scariest part was anticipating going down the slide beforehand, you know, and waiting on the stairs, because things are always scarier before you're into them. You know, once you're into them, it's okay. So all that anticipation is worse than the thing itself so often. I think we all kind of find that. Maybe you guys have found that too, you know, with tryouts and things like that. It's like once you're out there on the field or once you're actually, you know, doing your tryout on the stage or something, it's better than waiting for it to happen.
Another student remarks or asks, what is your favorite genre to write and what is the soup that you keep talking about?
My favorite genre is contemporary real. I like to write about contemporary realism, what's going on right now in our hearts and minds and our thoughts. There's so many things in the world right now that are challenges and struggles, and for me, it's meaningful to address those. So I guess that's my wheelhouse, like it or not. I feel like it's chosen me. That's what I care about. And the soup I'm talking about is just like, you know, when you're thinking of a story or you're thinking, and all those ideas are swirling in your head, kind of like all those little ideas that I had written on those slides about different things like, you know, dog crates and the Comic-Con festival and treasure hunts and going by yourself down, you know, in downtown alone and dealing with a treasure hunt, or in the Someday Birds, the soup of ideas swirling around, you know, the cross-country journey and the stinky camper and what's that like to be in there and what is it like to have to deal with annoying siblings and what is it like if you're all alone and you don't have your caregivers there, your dad or your grandma, and you have this strange babysitter you don't trust, and you know, what's that like? And what about birds? And what about loving, you know, this mysterious bird guru person? What would that be like? And what would it be like to, you know, have to leave the comfort of your home? And what would you be thinking and feeling? And how would you, you know, the people that you meet along the way? Those are all like the ingredients in a soup that kind of swirl around until they become the story.
Thank you.
So I guess it's a story soup.
Did you have any authors that you looked up to when you were younger?
Oh, yeah. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't grow up in a house that was filled with a lot of books. Interestingly enough, you know, we did have a school library, but it was really small. And I took out a lot of biographies of people. You know, there were these series of biographies for kids, kind of like that Who Was series, you know, those series that had like the big head on the cover. There were a lot of books like that, and I loved them because I felt like I was learning from these, you know, biographies how to be a person a little bit. They really helped me. And then at home, we had this old crumbling set of Dickens. You know, Charles Dickens, who wrote The Christmas Carol. Do you guys know Charles Dickens? And he wrote Oliver Twist and A Tale of Two Cities and all of these classic, amazing books. And I just like read them because they were there, because I would read anything. I would read cereal boxes, whatever was there, I would read. And I read all the Dickens books. And, you know, I went off to middle school kind of feeling like I was this Victorian waif. And it didn't really like teach me much useful to be a modern kid, but I loved those stories. I loved those books. I really thought they were pretty cool. And then I read Jane Eyre, like all that kind of stuff. I did love Judy Blume. I remember Judy Blume, you know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, was an incredible book that a friend told me about. So that was pretty amazing. I was a weird kid. I didn't read the normal books that everybody read.
Another student would like to know what you do about writer's block.
Oh, yeah, it's real, and I don't worry about it. I used to worry about it. Everyone makes such a big deal about it, like, oh, you know, I've run out of ideas, the well is dry. You know, it's not. I think you just need to take a break, you know, do something different, use a different part of your brain. I love to play piano, so I'll do that, or I will draw, or I will just go for a walk, or I'll watch stupid TV and completely forget, you know, about what I'm working on for a while, and just try to put it out of my mind. And eventually something jostles loose, you know. Sometimes reading things that are completely different from the thing you're working on give you ideas that come together in weird ways. So all kinds of different tactics. But I think the most important tactic is just don't worry about it. Just trust in the process. Because even if you're not sitting in front of your keyboard, if your brain's working on the problem somewhere, it's running programs in the background, no matter what you're doing. And that's writing too, if you're thinking about it. And that's also writing, part of writing. We have to have that thinking time built in.
A couple more technically oriented questions. One, have you ever stopped in the middle of writing a book and started over? And another, how do you choose between first and third person?
Oh, wow. Yes, I have stopped in the middle of the book and rewritten. Usually 50 pages seems to be the mark at which you realize, uh-oh, this isn't going the way I thought. I might have to change tactics here. And then you go back and you start it over. So yeah, that's happened quite a few times, especially on one book that is with my agent right now. It's a sci-fi set about 100 years in the future. It's actually more like climate fiction. It's changed so much. The settings, the characters, everything in it has just changed and rearranged. It was the hardest book I ever wrote. I don't even know if it'll ever become a book on a bookshelf. And I spent 2 years on it, rewriting it and rewriting it. So we'll see what happened there. I've learned a lot. We'll see what happens. I still love it personally, but we'll see. And what was the second one?
The other concerned point of view, how you select point of view from which to
First
tell
to
the story.
third, yeah. You know, third person is a great voice for those more sort of magisterial stories where you're a narrator and you're looking down on the characters and explaining, or if there's more than one main character and you need to talk about a few of them at a time, and you want to hold those threads together in your third person voice, a little bit more distant. But if you really are looking for immediacy, really slipping inside the skin of a character and helping your readers view the world through the eyes of that character, first person, and especially first person present, is the most immediate, most intimate voice that you can write in. And there are some constraints to it too, because of course, if you're writing from within the eyes of that main character all the time, you can only report what that main character is seeing. You can't go off and report, you know, your knowledge of something else that's going on. So it is limiting. That's the trade-off you just have to make. depending on what kind of story it is you want to be writing.
Thank you. Continuing with some more technical considerations, at least 3 students would like to know, how do you publish books?
Oh, the publishing process. Well, I publish with HarperCollins and with Lee and Low. Those are my publishers. How it works? Well, I guess how it worked like from the start. When I first wrote The Someday Birds, I had no idea how you did that. I was just writing a story. I had no idea how it would become a book someday. But I was applying for things like grants and writers' residencies, and a friend of mine helped me apply to one. I applied to one, told me about it, called Hedgebrook. And basically, it's this amazing place where they give you a cabin all your own. There's 6 cabins, 6 women. Each woman gets a cabin. You have to make your own fire, and then you have this place all to yourself, and all you have to do is write. And they bring you your food, and you have meals at a farmhouse together. So I finished writing The Someday Birds at this cabin on Whidbey Island off the coast of Seattle, by Seattle. Finished it there and read it to these other women who were amazing authors and writers, and they mentored me, and they told me, okay, here's what you have to do next. You know, you have to find an agent, you know, you have to, here's what you do, here's how you go about it. And so I did. I just followed their advice. I found an agent, and my agent helped me revise it a little bit, and then we prepared it to go out on submission to publishing companies. We sent it out to a bunch of different publishing companies, and they were interested. A few of them were interested, actually, which was really exciting. And I talked to the editors on the phone, and ended up at HarperCollins with a wonderful editor, Rosemary Brosnan and Annie Berger, and they helped me work on the book even more. Then they give you, once you're with a publisher has accepted and has bought your manuscript, they will give you an edit letter, it's called. Your work is not done then, your work is just starting. So you have this edit letter where the editor has written all the changes they'd like to see in the storyline because they've read it very carefully. And then you have to go back in. One of the changes was in my original manuscript, Charlie was 15. They wanted him to be younger, like around 12. So I had to make that change. And a bunch of other changes to the story. And when we all agreed that it's right, then they hired the cover artist. They hired an artist to do some illustration inside. It goes through all kinds of different editing, line editing, copy editing, all kinds of different things. You wouldn't believe the different things that they looked at. I mean, a copy editor even once said, in the night sky in southern Colorado and northern Wyoming, you would not see this particular constellation that you say Charlie is looking up at with Dr. Joan. Please choose a different constellation because that one would not be visible in June back then. So that's how closely they were looking at the book with the copy editors. So yeah, you make all those changes, and then the whole process takes about 2 years. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but that's kind of pretty much what it takes from start to end of a book to be published.
Thank you. Who is your favorite character in The Someday Birds and why?
I guess I'm going to have to say Charlie, although I really like the dog. But Charlie, yeah, because he voices so much of my heart, and I just feel the closest to him, you know, it's.
Have you ever had a challenge writing the ending?
Interestingly, I haven't had that much of a challenge with the ending. I think my process is writing the beginning, setting it up, seeing what the questions are, and that should come early in the story, setting those questions up, setting up the scenario, and then thinking about it, and then I will write a draft of the last scene. I do like to know before I start writing everything where the target is, where it is that I want to go. And oftentimes it will change. But if it changes, it's not a bad thing. It feels inevitable because of changes I've made all along the way. So I have rewritten the ending for sure, but I've never felt that it was hard. I have always felt like it was a target that I finally reached, and it's really satisfying.
Thank you. All right, here's a philosophical question. Does a book have to be relatable to everyone in some way?
Absolutely not. A book is not going to appeal to any book. Even like the best book ever written is not going to appeal to every human being on the planet. That's why we need so many different books and so many different stories, because this, it'll be your favorite book, but the person next to you may hate it. It just doesn't impact their worldview or where they are at that moment or what they feel. And that's totally okay. That's just a reason why we need so many diverse and different stories in the world, because we're all so different and we're all at different moments in our lives where different things appeal to us. So the more stories, the better. So you guys, I hope you writers write your stories, because I think the world needs to hear them.
Excellent, thank you. How do you keep your readers' attention?
That is the hardest trick. That is the hardest trick. And there are little tricks to it. You want to end every chapter on a little bit of a suspenseful note, a page turner. You want to be aware of that. For me, I try not to make my chapters be too long. I want them to be short and to the point and get out. A lot of people say when you're writing your scenes, start later than you think you should start and end earlier than you think you should end. Some people say that's good advice for going to parties too. Arrive a little bit later and then leave a little bit earlier when people still want you to stay. So it's like that with scenes in a book too. So that, there are tricks like that. Go through and make sure your language is lively, that you're not just haranguing on about, some informational dump of some sort, but that you're really moving the action along or moving the emotional action. And it doesn't have to be like physical action, like car chases. Some people think that keeping the audience engaged means throwing in, car chases and violence and crazy, and, all kinds of crazy big action with a capital A. It's not necessarily so. Sometimes what moves us the most is the emotional action that goes on inside the character, because we relate to it. And that makes us emotional too. And that feeling moved and feeling emotional from a character is what we take away and we remember. Long after we forget all about the car chase plot, we will remember the tears that we shared with the main character. So sometimes the action and engaging the audience, it doesn't have to be crazy action, but it has to be emotional and make the audience feel.
Thank you. Now, two questions that have a kind of a relationship to each other. Where did you get the idea for Charlie to continuously wash his hands? And another student wants to know how you come up with character mannerisms or quirks.
Oh, I'm from a very neurodivergent, quirky family. It's all part and parcel of various things that people in my family do, from grandparents to kids to cousins to whoever, we all have little quirks, and I guess it's sort of a composite of everything. Yeah. My husband he doesn't anymore, but one way, he was a little borderline OCD when he was a teenager, and he used to count. He had to count a certain number of times he washed his hands. He's a really successful guy, and he has no problem navigating the world whatsoever. But this was a way that during a phase when he was a teenager, he got through things, a stressful time. He would count washing his hands. So that actually came from him. And we all do what we do. We all do what we can to help ourselves get through. So.
And a final question. Do you ever think about the fact that your books help kids who are scared and feel the same way that you did when you were younger? That's
my goal. That is totally my goal. That's what I want to do, is just share that. And share that it's normal and human to feel scared. We all feel scared, but there are things that we can do to help ourselves through and to help each other through. And I think the more you demystify that and share our stories with each other, the more we realize we're all human, we're all in this together, and we'll get through it by being real with each other.
Sally, I want to thank you for spending this time with us. It's been wonderful. I think everybody should give her a round of applause. Thanks so much for writing the Someday Birds and giving these students such a rich experience. And thanks for spending this time with us. Students and everybody who's on the session, we're going to close it out in just a minute, and then you've got a short break, about 15 minutes before we all get a chance to hear Ruta Cepedes. And Ruta will be with us, and then we'll move from there right into the award ceremony. So, Sally, thank you again very much. And the rest of